history. I welcome. Thank you to everybody for coming here today. We are having our first ever Ollie Extras, and as you know, this is our third program in the series. We're so glad to have you join us. We have programming from South Dakota, North Dakota, Wyoming, Montana, Minnesota, and Iowa. We're working together to bring you some amazing programs this July. A couple housekeeping notes. We just want you to keep your microphones on mute, please. If you have questions, we'll have some question time in between movies. As Tom said, he'll explain that a little bit. And also, if you are like me and forget your questions in the meantime, feel free to put them in the chat and we will make sure that we get to as many of those as we can. We are going to put a survey in at the end of in the chat at the end. Please take a minute and grab that link to the survey before you leave us. That would be really great. We'd love to hear some feedback from you about our programming. So I would like to introduce, many of you from Minnesota already know Kate, but I'd like to introduce Kate, who's going to introduce our speaker.
Yes, and I'm director of Ollie at University of Minnesota. So glad to meet you all. I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement statement for our university. We acknowledge that the University of Minnesota Twin Cities is built within the traditional homelands of the Dakota people. It's important to acknowledge the peoples on whose lands we live, learn, and work as we seek to improve and strengthen our relations with our tribal nations. We also acknowledge that words are not enough. We must ensure that our institution provides support, resources, and programs that increase access to all aspects of higher education for our American Indian students, staff, faculty, and community members. So I am delighted to be here today, and Thea, thank you so much for all of the work you've done to put together this series. It's what a fun opportunity for all of us to get a glimpse into some of the work that's going on throughout all the Ollies in our region. And I am also just thrilled to introduce Tom Rooney. Tom Rooney is one of our most popular Ollie instructors. He's taught a variety of sports-related courses for us since 2014. Examples of courses he's taught include Shut Up and Dribble, Sports and Activism, Minnesota Sports, A History of Heartbreak, and his upcoming course this fall, Women in Sports. Tom's a retired CPA who's been an employee of the Minnesota Twins for the last 11 seasons. And for the last 3 seasons, he's been a member of the Twins Tour and Education Organization. He's also a tour guide for the Minnesota Vikings US Bank Stadium, and he's a member of Ollie's Curriculum Committee and leader of the Ollie Peer Mentor Team. We are so lucky to have Tom as an instructor, and I think you're going to really enjoy his talk today. So thank you so much, Tom. Let me turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. Kate once again proves that you can fool some of the people some of the time because she thinks great. I need you to make me a co-host so I can start this. But let's get started so I can share my screen. You got me as a co-host? So did you co-host me? Because I can't share my screen right now. We were too busy talking before. Story of my life. Oh no. So, well, as I can start even though I'm talking. As Kate said, my name's Tom Rooney. I'm actually a CPA by training. I went to the University of Northern Iowa, yes, who you all know as the Harvard of the Midwest, or at least, let's say the Harvard of Black Hawk County, Iowa. So let me show you what I've got here. So here's our show today. Boom, no crying in baseball. But first, before we started, I wanted to let you know that this is a special day for me. Because not only do I get to share a subject I really enjoy with a lot of people, but I get to say happy birthday to the woman in this picture. And that's my mother. My mother was born 100 years ago today, July 19th, 1922. So I wanted to take time for 2 reasons. First, to give a shout out to one of the most important women in my life. And second, I'm hoping that the warmth generated by this touching moment will reduce the likelihood that you'll heckle or boo me during my class. So we'll see how well that works. So happy birthday, Mother. So who am I? As I said, went to the University of Northern Iowa, a CPA. I worked in public accounting for a while, then went to Medtronic, a small medical products company in Minnesota. After I retired, I went to the Twins. I was an usher in section 116, 117, the two best sections in the entire stadium, for about 8 seasons. And I've been a tour guide at Target Field since then, and also at US Bank Stadium. Member of OLLI. Last 8 years, I've developed and presented classes related to sports, all kinds of sports: baseball, basketball, football, hockey, soccer. We in the Twin Cities have been lucky enough to host both a Super Bowl and a Final Four in the last 4 years. And so we had classes on those. As Kate said, we had ones on activism and politics and on pop culture. I developed a 7-session course on baseball and pop culture, and we covered popular music, starting with Take Me Out to the Ball Game. As you may know, the third most popular song in America, behind Happy Birthday and the Star Spangled Banner, and all kinds of other music. We talked about baseball in commercials, including the baseball man cigarette, Chesterfield or Phillies, when these ball players want a taste of a good cigar, but also Kellogg's Corn Flakes, when you could use your empty Kellogg's Corn Flakes box as home plate in one of those commercials. But much of our time we spent with movies. There's a lot of baseball movies. And so that's what we're going to spend the rest of our day with today, is talking about movies. And we will start, because that is one of the ways that that's where our title for our show comes from today. There's
Hey, Evelyn, can I ask you a question? You got a moment?
Mm-hmm.
Which team do you play for?
Well, I'm a peach.
Well, I was just wondering, because I couldn't figure out why you would throw home when we've got a 2-run lead. You let the tying run get on second, and we lost the lead because of you. Now you start using your head. That's that love that's 3 feet above your ass. Are you crying?
No.
Are you crying? Are you crying? There's no crying. There's no crying in baseball.
Why don't you leave her alone, Jimmy?
Oh, you zip it.
Oh, you zip it. There's no crying in baseball. So let's talk about baseball in the movies. Let's go to the movies. I went and checked at the multiplex today. There's actually 3 baseball movies that are all showing at the multiplex. They're fictional movies, but based on some facts. We've got The League of Their Own. You got the Bingo Long Traveling All-Stars and Motor Kings, and you have The Natural. So in Theater 1, A League of Their Own, 1992 film. For each of these, we'll watch the trailer so you get an idea of the movie if you haven't seen it. So here is a trailer for that movie.
I'd like to lead you all in a little prayer. Dear Lord, may our feet be swift, may our bats be mighty, and may our balls be plentiful. And Lord, I'd just like to thank you for that waitress in South Bend. You know who she is. She kept calling your name.
This summer, Tom Hanks is managing the impossible, the Rockford Peaches.
Says girls can't play baseball. Who says women can't throw?
Slide! Slide! Thank you!
Give them a league of their own to play. Then stand back and get out of their way.
That sounded good.
So let's all root for the girls' team. Let's give the poor coach a break.
still missing the cutoff man. Now, that's something that I would like you to work on before next season.
'Cause it's Flash, Flash, we're having a bash at the old ball game.
Got him!
Columbia Pictures would like to take you out to the ball game for an all-star comedy.
They'll pay you $75 a week.
We only make 30 at the dairy.
Well then, this would be more, wouldn't it?
The manager, Tom Hanks.
Are you crying? There's no crying. There's no crying in baseball.
The catcher, Gina Davis.
What do you say we slip in the back seat and you make a man out of me?
What if I smack you around for a while?
Can't we do both?
The pitcher, Lori Petty.
I made it! I'm a peach! A Rockford peach!
The scout, John Lovitz.
Are you coming? See how it works is, the train moves, not the station.
And batting cleanup, Madonna.
What if my uniform bursts open and oops, my bosoms come flying out?
You think there are men in this country who ain't seen your bosoms?
A league of their own.
All right. God knows we have a game. It's not like any of this helps, believe me.
Directed by Penny Marshall.
So let's go back to ours. So a league of their own. Here's the plot. Two sisters, Kit and Dottie, played by Lori Petty and Gina Davis, both of whom you saw in the trailer there, joined the first female professional baseball league, along with other girls, on the Rockford Peaches. With drunk manager Jimmy Dugan, played by Tom Hanks, and wild girl May Mortabetto, played by Madonna, they find themselves surrounded with drama and troubles. Now, as I said, that's a fictional movie, but it's based on some truth situations. Three of them we're going to cover right now. One, professional women's baseball teams. Second, the Minneapolis Millerettes. The third, Jimmy Fox. So let's talk about the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, otherwise known as the AGRABAPL. Yeah, it doesn't flow off the tongue very well, does it? But the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League was a professional women's league, existed from 1943 to 1954. Over 600 women played in the league, consisted at one time of 10 teams located in the American Midwest. In 1948, league attendance was over 900,000 spectators, and the most successful team, the Rockford Peaches, won the league championship 4 times. Now, the league was the creation of Philip Wrigley, the chewing gum king, who owned the Chicago Cubs. There's Phil Wrigley on the left. He hoped to keep baseball alive in the small Midwestern towns that were losing their minor league teams to the war. When you have the thousands of men going off to the war and not playing baseball anymore, there's not enough ball players to keep the minor league teams in these towns. So Philip Wrigley wanted to keep baseball alive. He was aware of the popularity of women's softball competition in metro centers throughout the US and Canada, specifically in Chicago because the Cubs were there, and Los Angeles because at the time that's where the Cubs spring training was held, was in Southern California. So he knew that women's softball existed and at a fairly high level. Of course, he himself had considerable financial resources. He had a lifelong interest in sport, including an interest in promoting women's involvement as baseball spectators. He was a businessman. The more I can get women interested in baseball, the more likely they are to buy a ticket to a Cubs game. And he also had a desire to support the war effort. He was aware also that between 1940 and the fall of 1942, when he came up with this idea, that millions of women were employed to fill the shoes of men drafted in the military. And he reasoned that if women could take over for men in other fields of endeavor, they could also fill in at the baseball field. So Wrigley held tryouts for the league in May of 1943. And while skill was necessary, so was ladylike behavior. Femininity is the keynote of our league, Wrigley said. No pants-wearing, tough-talking female softballer is going to play on any of our teams. Wow. So the teams consisted of 15 players, one coach, one business manager, and one chaperone. Each of them had chaperones because these were ladylike ladies. We didn't want to get in any trouble. And as John Lovett said when he was talking, where they said, we'll pay you $75 a week, the players were signed to contracts and salaries ranging from $45 to $85 a week, which is about, $660 to $1,250 in today's money. And at the time, that exceeded the salaries that many of them made in their manufacturing jobs, and even was higher than some of the salaries that the men's minor professional leagues made. So they were paid good money. The first year, there were 4 teams, all in the expanded Chicago area. That's where Philip Wrigley was. So you had 2 in Wisconsin, Kenosha and Racine. You had 1 in Rockford, Illinois, and 1 in South Bend, just into Indiana. A very successful 43 season. And so the next year they decided we're going to expand into some larger cities that still had their minor league men's teams. So those first 4, they had the men's teams didn't exist anymore. So the women's took the men's place. But the next year they said, let's see if we could go to some bigger cities where they still may have the men's team. And so they selected 2 cities that were part of that had American Association men's teams in it, Milwaukee and Minneapolis. So let's talk about the Minneapolis Millerettes. Of course, Minneapolis, we're the mill city with a combination of grain from the Midwest and the mills powered by the Mississippi River, General Mills, Pillsbury, etc. So everything in Minneapolis was related to the mills. The men's team was the Minneapolis Millers, and so of course the women's team became the Millerettes. And here was their uniform: the city of Minneapolis, the All-American Girls Baseball League on their jerseys, and you see the emblem there with the falls and the granaries, and that is a picture of the Millerettes. Now, they played in Nicollet Park, which is the same park where the Minneapolis Millers played. And here's what happened. So in 1944, they start out, opened their season on May 27th. Throughout the first few weeks of the season, they played pretty well, won several games. The crowds grew steadily to hundreds of fans crowding into the stands at each home game. However, a slump followed their initial success, and it soon sunk them into last place in the league. And by the end of the first half of the season, their 1-loss record was 23 wins, 36 losses. Last place in the league. And then they start the second half, smaller crowds, and continuing losses. Now, the other teams in the league, remember, now all those teams are in the Chicago area. At that time, there's no freeways going from Chicago to Minneapolis. So when you take a road trip to Minneapolis on 2-lane highways back in the 40s on a bus, not so fun. So the other teams in the league began to complain and have to take a long bus ride all the way to Minneapolis, and there'd be hardly anybody there to watch them. Also at the time, of course, you've got gas rationing and all kinds of other reasons to not want to take a big road trip to Minneapolis. And because the Minneapolis Millerettes were not playing exceptionally well, not only was it causing the league to lose money, but it also lost a little of their credibility. So in late July, the league decided we're not going to Minneapolis anymore. So all of the Millerettes' home games for the rest of the season were switched back to the teams that they were supposed to play. So instead of, South Bend driving all the way here to play to Minneapolis, we'll play a home game. We'll just play that in South Bend. And so the Minneapolis team was forced to play all the rest of their games in the second half on the road. They were on the road all the time. Now, they're no longer really a Minneapolis team. And so the Minneapolis newspaper stopped running their box scores. The team became unofficially known as the Orphans. because they lived out the remaining of the season on the road. And the second half of their season wasn't any better than the first half. They ended up 26 games out of first place, won 45 games, lost 72. So an experiment in Minneapolis didn't go so well. In fact, next year, those players who were on the Millerettes found a new home in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And they became the Fort Wayne Daisies, one of the most popular teams in the league. And in fact, in the 4 seasons from 51 to 54, in total for those 4 years, the Daisies had the best record in the league, but they never won the championship. Something, unfortunately, sports teams in Minnesota, especially football ones, can relate to. Didn't want to bring up that sore subject. So what does a failed baseball team in Minneapolis have to do with the movie A League of Their Own? Well, there's a connection. And that connection is Helen Callahan. So Helen Callahan led the Millerettes in hitting. She was second in the league in batting average. She and her sister, much like the movie, here from Vancouver, British Columbia. In the movie, I think Gina Davis and Laura Petty were from Oregon, but 2 sisters from the Northwest come to Minnesota. They were the first 2 sisters to play in the league. So you may still be saying, I still don't quite see the connection. Well, the connection comes through Helen Callahan's son. Her son, Kelly Candelay, in 1987, he made a documentary film about his mother's participation in a women's league for the local Los Angeles public television station. So he made a documentary called A League of Their Own, because he thought that title captured something special about those wonderful but unknown athletes. And here's actually the promo that would have shown up on public television for that documentary. So the son of one of those players makes a documentary.
They don't win, it's a shame. Or it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game.
The old ball game, at least the way they played it in the early 1940s, was different. Different because back then a woman's place was at home. It was also at first, at second, and at third. These women are members of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. They played throughout the country from 1943 to 1954. This is a story about the old ball game, their ball game, and the way they played it during a recent weekend reunion of the league in Fort Wayne, Indiana. It was there that a group of veteran ball players from Southern California joined more than 100 of their teammates from across the United States and Canada. They gathered to swap stories, trade secrets, renew friendships, picnic, party, and of course, play ball.
So that was the ad. As you saw, California Stories was the series that was being shown on public television. Well, amongst the people who saw that was Penny Marshall. She saw the documentary on the local public television and was inspired because she had never heard of the Women's Baseball League, and she was inspired to make a film after viewing that documentary. She'd never heard of it, so she actually contacted the documentary's creators and said, come work with me. We're going to write a screenplay. And so that's how that movie started. So a failed Minneapolis team at least plants the seed for the movie. Now, another interesting piece about Helen is her second son, Casey, played for 9 years in the majors. He played with the Expos, the Astros, and the Indians. Casey and Helen are the only mother-son combination to have ever both played professional baseball. So kind of cool. Now, so that gets you through the league, through the Minneapolis Millerettes. Now we're going to talk about Jimmy Fox, because in the movie, Tom Hanks plays a character named Jimmy Dugan, a fall-down drunk whose big league career was ended by a knee injury he got after setting a fire at a hotel and jumping out the window. That's the story that's in the movie as to why he wasn't playing. Well, at the end of the movie, if you remember, there is a reunion at the Hall of Fame, and you see a tribute sign featuring Jimmy Dugan. Jimmy Dugan hitting 58 home runs, it says there. It also says he played third base. Well, let's go to Jimmy Fox. Now, the filmmakers insist that all the characters are fictional. Jimmy Dugan bears a striking similarity to Jimmy Fox, who actually managed briefly in the Women's League. Former Hall of Famer, played in the majors for 21 seasons, mostly for the Athletics and the Red Sox. He was primarily a first baseman, but he did play 140 games at third. And in his best season, he hit 58 home runs, the exact same amount that Jimmy Dugan, the fictitious manager, supposedly had. He compiled a 364 batting average and hit 534 home runs when he retired second in the league in home runs. And he was also known to be a pretty good drinker. So we come back. Also, one other scene in that, as I said, in that final scene in A League of Their Own, it was filmed actually on site. If you go to the Baseball Hall of Fame, which this weekend, the twins, Tony Oliva and Jim Cotter, both getting inducted into the Hall of Fame this weekend. If you were there and strolled through, you would actually see that exhibit, Diamond Dreams, with the characters in the film going through this exhibit that was dedicated to women in baseball. So that is A League of Their Own. I'm going to stop because we need a couple of minutes to sneak into the next theater. So
we do have a couple of questions in the chat.
Yeah.
Rick wanted to say that it's also Rachel Robinson's, Jackie's wife, who is 100 years old today.
Really? My mother and Rachel Robinson?
Yes.
How cool is that?
Yes. And then John asks, were there any Black women allowed to play?
No. Nope. Just like every place else at that time, there wasn't. Yes, that was Rosie O'Donnell that was there. And actually, Rosie O'Donnell was a heck of a ball player on her own. And she was, in fact, there's a little documentary where they talk about Penny Marshall talking to her, and she told Rosie O'Donnell to kind of take Madonna under her wing because Madonna had never played ball in her life. And said, and in fact, she had been a dancer all her life, and they said she played ball like a dancer, hop, skip, step, throw, it took forever. And so he said, Rosie O'Donnell, you know how to play this game. And so you show her the ropes. So any other questions?
There was one more comment from Pixie, who said, my mom was accepted at the Rockford Peaches tryouts, but couldn't get her mom's signature to actually play. She went to many of their games there.
Yo, the woulda, coulda, shoulda, Pixies.
I know.
Oh, yes. So, Wayne.
Yeah, Tom. So where would the women players have been recruited from? From softball?
Yes,
teams?
all from softball leagues. They went, in fact, because Philip Wrigley knew kind of the organization of Major League Baseball, he basically told everybody's scouts to go to their local softball areas and find out who the best of them were. And then you get someone like John Lovitz, who was there saying, saw you playing, come here. They had a huge tryout at Wrigley Field. And at the first one, like I said, there was only 4 teams, 15 players. So they were only looking for 60 players. So you take you take the Minneapolis or Chicago and a couple of concentric circles outside of there. If you're looking for 60 ball players, yeah, you probably find them there. But then as the league started to get bigger, they eventually had 10 teams. So but yeah, one thing also you may have noticed, I don't know if anybody noticed in the film, but one time when they were showing the film, the woman was pitching underhanded like softball. The league changed. At the very beginning, they played underhanded softball, but moving toward baseball. So as the league went, it went from underhanded and shorter bases to each year they moved a little further toward baseball and a little further away from softball. So any other questions? Otherwise, we're going to sneak into our next theater. So let me share my screen. I am not encouraging anyone to sneak into the next theater, but if you wish, and let me get rid of.
One question, wasn't it harder to slide in skirts?
Oh my gosh, of course. That would be very painful, but that was part of we're not having any pants wearing. You heard Philip Wrigley's piece. We are going to, we're going to be pretty feminine here. Yes, that would have been extremely painful. If any of you have it, even, slid even with baseball pants on, that can be. So in Theater 2, the Bingo Long Traveling All-Stars and Motor Kings from 1976. So let's go watch the video. Let's go watch the trailer for that.
In the 1930s, to play ball in the major leagues, you had to be white. To play in the Negro League, you had to be great. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Bingo Long and the greatest congregation of athletic talent ever assembled in one place at one time for one purpose.
Play ball! They say you're a pretty fair hitter. So they say. Well, here's this.
Billy D. Williams is Bingo Long. James Earl Jones is Leon Carter.
Ball players gotta overthrow the owners and run the teams their own selves.
You think we can do that? Do what? Overthrow the owners?
Sure. Same day we turned white.
Richard Pryor is Charlie Snow.
From now on, I'm going to be known as Carlos Navarro. I'm going to break into the majors as a Cuban.
He can hit, he can run, he can score.
Buenas noches, senora. Can I buy you a drink?
The Bingo Long, Traveling All-Stars and Motor King.
What you gonna do about this mess, Sally Potter? It's your picture what's leading this band of detergents.
Your All-Stars against mine. One big game down in St. Louis.
Barnstorming in the 1930s. It was daring.
Just drive me off at the baseball practice.
It was demoralizing.
Come on, this wonderful lady.
It was downright dangerous.
You gentlemen checking out?
Who would have thought it could be so much fun?
Whoa!
Now we got to ruin that team before they're gonna ruin us.
Bingo Long, Traveling All-Stars, and Motor King!
One more time! Listen to Bingo, still on home!
Bingo Long. So let's talk about it. Boom. There we go. Whoops. All right. So, plot summary. So, tired of the slave-like treatment of his team owner, the charismatic star Negro League pitcher Bingo Long takes to the road with his band of barnstormers through the small towns of the Midwest in the 1930s. Bingo's team becomes so outlandishly entertaining and successful, it begins to cut into the attendance of the established Negro League team. So finally, Bingo's nemesis, the head of the Negro Leagues, is forced to propose a winner-take-all game. So that's what the movie's about. Loosely based on a novel by William Brashler. Here's what we're going to cover here, a little bit of truth. The Negro Baseball Leagues, Satchel Paige, Josh Gibson, and the Indianapolis Clowns. So, after baseball became segregated in 1889, blacks were prohibited from playing in the major leagues. In response, black baseball players formed their own professional baseball leagues that were collectively referred to as the Negro Leagues. February 1920, talks were held in Kansas City. They established the Negro National League. One thing the league was insistent upon was that black teams should be owned by black men. And it was initially composed of 8 teams, 2 of them in Chicago, 1 without a home, the Cuban Stars, Dayton, Detroit, Indianapolis, Kansas City, and St. Louis. And Rube Foster was the league president, but he was also the owner of one of the teams. This is a stamp that was issued about 2010 on the Negro Baseball Leagues. That's Rube Foster. Foster controlled every aspect of the league, including which players played on which teams, when and where the teams played, what equipment was used, all of which had been purchased from Foster. And he claimed that he was the booking agent of the league, so he took a 5% cut of all gate receipts. So when you saw in the movie that the players are saying, we're kind of getting robbed by the owners, yeah, you might see why. Some of the characters and situations in the movie are loosely based on real life people and incidents. Now, the director of the movie, John Badham, grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, and was familiar with the Birmingham Black Barons. They played in the same field as the Birmingham Barons, which were all white. They weren't called the Birmingham White Barons, but the black team was the Black Barons. So he was familiar with the Negro Leagues and their players. So let's talk about one of them. Leon Carter, the character played by James Earl Jones, is based on Josh Gibson. Josh Gibson's considered the greatest hitter and catcher in the history of the Negro Leagues and among the greatest baseball players of all time. He is known as the Black Babe Ruth. In fact, some fans at the time who saw both Babe Ruth and Josh Gibson play said they should actually refer to Babe Ruth as the white Josh Gibson, not the other way around. How far could he hit a baseball? Well, let me tell you a story. One day, the Pittsburgh Crawfords were playing at Forbes Field in Pittsburgh. Josh Gibson hits a ball so high and so far that no one could even saw it come down. After scanning the sky carefully for a few minutes, the umpire deliberated and ruled it as a home run. The next day, the Crawfords are in Philadelphia, 300 miles away, when suddenly a ball dropped out of the heavens and was caught by the startled center fielder on the opposing club. The umpire, the same one who had worked the game before, pointed to Gibson and shouted, "You're out," yesterday in Pittsburgh. Yes, that home run went 300 miles. That's how far he could hit a ball. Okay, maybe that's not a true story, but it's a good story. So that's Josh Gibson. Bingo Long, the Billy D. Williams character, is based on a former Birmingham Black Baron, Leroy Satchel Paige. Now, as a youth, Leroy helped support his family, including working as a baggage porter at the rail depot in Mobile, Alabama. And on one occasion, when he was loaded down with bags, another porter looked at him and said, "You look like a walking satchel tree." And from then on, Leroy Paige became Satchel Paige. Satchel Paige played for teams all over the country, from California to Maryland, North Dakota, even in Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Mexico. Between contracts, he was always jumping contracts to get the best deals. So he would, if it paid him more money to be in North Dakota than in Puerto Rico, that's where I'm playing. So between those, he built quite a following by barnstorming. And what barnstorming tours is, you'd have exhibition games against either other professionals or regional talent that provided extra money. For example, you would end up and come into a part of the Midwest and say, we're going to play a game tonight. You get your best baseball players together. We'll challenge them to a match. We'll charge a fee to get in, and the two of us will split it. We'll take half. You guys can keep the other half. So their days would be start out early in the morning in a town, trying to build up as much excitement for that game tonight. That's where you saw in the film where they were, marching through the streets and playing music. They're wanting to get everybody excited to come out and watch them play that night, play a game, split the pot, be somewhere else the next day. In fact, and then they also had games where they were oftentimes in the off season for the major leagues. Even the major league players would say, we could use some extra money. So they would set up exhibition games. And in one such game, Satchel Paige ended up pitching to Joe DiMaggio, who called him the best and fastest pitcher he had ever faced. Along with being a first-rate pitcher, he was also a consummate salesman. He reveled in slapstick humor and trick plays. People fell in love with his windmill windups and his relentless trash talking. You saw it a little bit in the video there, especially taken with his penchant for showboating. One of his favorite moves was his team would get out in the field. He'd tell his outfielders, you guys can come in and sit in the dugout. I don't need you. Or have his infielders take a seat and then single-handedly strike out the other side. So that was Satchel Paige. So you've got the Negro Leagues, Josh Gibson, Satchel Paige. The last element, the Indianapolis Clowns. Now the Clowns were members of the Negro American League from 43 to 54. Now they, as a team, had started back in the 30s, and they were actually the last of the Negro League teams to disband because they continued to play exhibition games into the 1980s. They fielded a legitimate team. In fact, Henry Aaron played for them when he was young. The Clowns also toured with several members known for their comic acts, sort of a baseball version of the Harlem Globetrotters. In fact, Abe Saperstein, who owned the Harlem Globetrotters, also owned the Indianapolis Clowns for a while. They put on a racially stereotypical act, frequently wearing grass skirts and wild makeup and clowning on the field. Here's a little bit, you see, they even advertised themselves as the greatest show team in baseball history, and you come for the laughs. You see the guy on the upper right, he'd have a first baseman's glove that was the size of, a manhole cover, and a bat that was about, one, it'd be illegal because you can't use a bat that big, but that doesn't really matter. And they also played, and you may have noticed in the trailer, with them carrying out a very short baseball player, and you see him batting there. He played the field too. So they were a legitimate baseball team, but they were in it for the fun. They were the first professional baseball team to hire a female player to a long-term contract that wasn't voided soon after. Sometimes people would sign it just for publicity, but they were the first one to sign a real ball player, and that was Tony Stone. Tony Stone played second base with the team, 1953. She batted .243. She was a pioneer in both softball and baseball. She was born Marcinia Lyle, 1921. She grew up in St. Paul, Minnesota, in the Rondo neighborhood. Played informal baseball at Welcome Field, played with the boys. She was nicknamed Tomboy, of course. She was discouraged by others from playing baseball, but she was determined, stopped at nothing, until she was noticed by Gabby Street, who was a former catcher and manager of the St. Louis Cardinals. And he was so impressed with her that he admitted her to his St. Paul-based baseball skills school. So she was good enough to get the attention of a former manager. Come, we'll play, show you how to play the game. She played all across the country, San Francisco, New Orleans, with the Clowns, with the Kansas City Monarchs. She retired in 1954. In fact, with the Clowns, she played second base. She filled in. The previous second baseman was Henry Aaron, who had just been called up to play with the Milwaukee Braves in the major leagues. So that was an interesting predecessor. Am I better than the person who was here before? Wow, that's an awful high bar. She was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1990 with both the Women in Baseball and the Negro League Baseball exhibits. She's been inducted into the Women's Sports Foundation's International Women's Sports Hall of Fame. She was honored in St. Paul with the Tony Stone Day on March 6th. And if you drive down near St. Paul's Central High School, there's this Tony Stone Field. It's part of the Dunning Baseball Complex. There's a book, if you want to read about her, Curveball. Chronicles her remarkable journey facing down not only fastballs, but jeers, sabotage, and Jim Crow America. Story reveals how far passion, pride, and determination can take one person in pursuit of a dream. And there is actually a play, Tony Stone, based on that book. In fact, it was declared the best new play in 2019 by the Wall Street Journal, who I always look for my play recommendations, the Wall Street Journal. But anyway, so we covered the Negro Baseball League, Satchel Paige, Josh Gibson, and the Indianapolis Clowns. There are actually a few other true stories in the movie. One, you heard Richard Pryor calling himself Carlos Nevada. And he tried to convince people first that he was Cuban, Carlos Nevada, and then later as a Native American, Chief Takahoma, wearing a mohawk. He did that because while you couldn't play if you were Black, light-skinned players from Cuba were acceptable. In fact, in 1910, the Reds signed 2 light-skinned players from Cuba. Both of them had actually played Negro baseball as part of the all-Cuban team we talked about. When questions arose about them playing in a white man's game, the Cincinnati managers assured the public that they were as pure white as Castile soap. So that whole storyline of Richard Pryor trying to convince people he was either Cuban or Indian so he could play Major League Baseball was based on some bit of fact. And then the last scene in the movie, in the stands for the final game, is a scout for the white major leagues. And he was so impressed by one of the players on Bingo Long's team, Esquire Joe Calloway, that he offers the young man the opportunity to be the one to desegregate baseball. Signs a contract actually with the Brooklyn Dodgers at Films Inn. And that, of course, is both a triumph for him, but a swan song for everything that Bingo Long and Leon and the Negro Leagues stood for. And if you want to see more, there's plenty of movies about Jackie Robinson, all the way back from the Jackie Robinson Story, which actually starred Jackie Robinson, back to 42 a few years ago with the late, great Chadwick Boseman. So that's Bingo Long, theater number 2.
We have a couple questions in the chat here.
Yes, I'm going to stop my share here if I can. Oops. How do I get there? Boom. I just have. Okay. You can talk. I'll just get out. Here.
What was the North Dakota team Satchel Paige played for?
Oh, I'll find out for you. But I will.
Okay.
Not sure.
Also, were the Clowns contemporaries of the Harlem Globetrotters? Seems like a similar idea. Or
Yes, in fact, Abe Saperstein, as I said, owned both of them. both the basketball and the baseball team, and said, yeah, that's a winning formula, as you would say, if you are good enough to play, and people would come out to pay to see you. That was the key in both the Globetrotters and the Clowns, was how do you build up enough enthusiasm so that people would buy tickets to come watch you play, get over whatever their prejudices were about cheering for Black players. It's like, if it's a show, if it's like vaudeville, I'll come and pay a ticket for that, even if I would never go watch them do anything I'd never spend my hard-earned money and give it over. So, Wayne, you have a question?
Yeah, Tom, you'll have to check, but I think Satchel Paige paid for the Fargo Moorhead Twins.
I think he did too.
Yeah, at Barnett Field. So,
yeah.
All right. Someone asked, what was the Tony Stone play?
It's actually called Tony, and it is, you can, I was reading about it. It is on right now. They did a development. It's actually called Tony Stone, I think. And the theater, the Repertory Theater in Milwaukee and Atlanta together developed it. And I just read in January, just this year, 5 months ago, it was in Milwaukee, and a couple months ago it was in Atlanta. So, and then it was off Broadway. Oh my gosh, Rick, when you talk about the Negro Baseball Museum in Kansas City, worth the visit, is it well worth the visit? If you've never been there, it shares the building with the Jazz Museum. Oh my gosh, you could spend, more than all day long watching that. And it's in Kansas City because, as we said, in 1920, that's where the league was formed, was in those initial meetings in Kansas City. So
one more question right above Rick's from Susan.
Yeah, what audience was the Clowning Lions intended to attract? Well, it was mostly to attract white people, because what they would do is, as you saw some of the parade, I'm coming into town, I'm going to make a big deal out of this, and we're going to be into town, we're going to play ball, we're going to make, and this is what's kind of funny about it, we're going to make fun of your players, and you're going to pay us to come watch us do that. And by tomorrow morning, we're gone. They would kind of stroll through. And in fact, when you saw the scene with the guy with the gun, when they were trying to sneak out, that was actually them trying to sneak out of their hotel I think in the movie, they were in Stillwater, Minnesota, because they didn't have enough money and they were trying to sneak out. And that was the hotel owner catching them coming out the back door. Yes, Bismarck Churchills. Bismarck. So both Kathleen and Dick, he played for Bismarck in 1935. So 2 movies down. I think we've got time enough to go to another movie, because it's a hot day and it's an air-conditioned theater. So let's go to the theater and watch, what's our third movie, I wonder? Now showing in theater number 3, The Natural, 1984. Let's watch this.
Someday when people look at me, they'll say, there goes Roy Hobbs, the best there ever was.
TriStar Pictures presents Robert Redford in The Natural, the story of a father and a son.
You got a gift, Roy, but it's not enough.
Of love.
He means the world to me.
And desire.
I'm not waiting for true love to come along, Roy.
A champion.
A Roy Hobbs comes along once, maybe twice in everybody's lifetime.
And his destiny.
With or without the records, they'll remember you.
Best there is now, and best there ever will be.
I wouldn't bet against me.
I already have.
Robert Redford, Robert Duvall, Glenn Close, Kim Basinger, Wilford Brimley, Barbara Hershey, Robert Prosky, and Richard Farnsworth as Red. The Natural.
So let's get rid of this. Okay. So story, it's loosely based on a novel by Bernard Malamud. One thing you'll notice if you've ever read the book, the story ends totally differently, but not to spoil it. But the plot summary: on the way to a tryout with the Cubs, young baseball phenom Roy Hobbs is shot by an unstable woman, Harriet Bird. After 16 years, Hobbs returns to pro baseball as a rookie for the last place New York Knights. Despite early arguments with his manager, Pop Fisher, Hobbs becomes one of the best players in the league, and the Knights start winning. But that upsets the judge, who is the team owner, who wants Hobbs to lose games, not to win. So, three things we'll talk about here, big ones. One, Eddie Waitkus. Second, the Black Sox scandal. And third, the 1988 Game 1 of the World Series. So, let's talk about the movie. In the movie, Hobbs meets Harriet Bird, played by Barbara Hershey, on a train to Chicago. And after they arrive in Chicago, she calls Roy in his hotel room and asks him to come to her room. He knocks on her door, enters the room. Harriet, dressed in black, asked if Hobbs' boast that he could be the best there ever was is true. He says yes, and she shoots him in the abdomen, leaving him for dead, and then commits suicide by leaping out the hotel window. Well, that incident is modeled on the shooting of Phillies first baseman Eddie Waitkus by an overwrought fan, which almost snuffed out Waitkus's life. Shooting took place in a Chicago hotel room, exactly the same as the movie, on the night of June 14th of 1949. Let's, there's a quick little story about that.
Eddie Waitkus, baseball's natural. Eddie Waitkus was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts on September 4th, 1919. Waitkus grew up in a time of growing player popularity within sports, in part by radio broadcasts. When people like Graham McNamee and Bill Stern covered baseball games for the radio, they focused on iconic players, launching these players to stardom. When Eddie Waitkus entered the scene in the 1940s, fans of the game considered players as heroes. Eddie Waitkus burst onto the scene with the Chicago Cubs in 1946. In 1948, Waitkus enjoyed a career year, batting .300 and making the All-Star team for the Chicago Cubs, and he still showed the promise of more improvements to come. This talent made him trade bait, however, and in the following year, the Cubs traded him to Philadelphia. Waitkus did not skip a beat, however, making the All-Star team for the Phillies the following year. Although during his time in Chicago, he unknowingly gained attention from a troubled young woman named Ruth Steinhagen. As a child, Ruth Steinhagen did not want people to look at her. She did not like being the center of attention. She found an escape for her troubles at Wrigley Field. Ruth Steinhagen grew a fascination with Eddie Waitkus during the Cubs baseball games. She fed her obsession by stalking him on game day at Wrigley Field. She went to the games with her then-boyfriend to stare at Eddie for the entire game. As her obsession grew worse, she would collect every newspaper article and picture that she could find and build a shrine to him in her bedroom. She became obsessed with anything connected with him. Eddie was from Lithuanian descent, so she began taking classes to speak the language in a crazy attempt to be closer to him. In 1948, she left her job to wander around the city in search of Eddie. Wake's trade to Philadelphia deprived Ruth of her obsession and steadily pushed her to madness. The only thing that fed her obsession was now gone, over 750 miles away. On June 14th, 1949, when the Phillies were playing in Chicago, Ruth Steinhagen left Eddie Wake's a note to visit an old friend in the Edgewater Beach Hotel. When Wake went to the room to see his friend, Ruth was waiting for him and told him that his friend had left but would return soon. When Wake sat down to wait, Ruth pulled out a .22 rifle and shot him point blank in the chest. After she had shot him, she calmly walked into the hallway and yelled,
"I shot Eddie Wakes."
When police arrived, Steinhagen was sitting calmly in the room with Eddie and was taken into custody. Eddie was rushed to the hospital for emergency surgery and almost died on the hospital table several times.
So, eerily similar, yes.
As the radio thrust Eddie in.
There we go. So, sounds a lot like that story we just talked about, doesn't it? So, Eddie Wakes. Now, what's interesting, a little bit different now, is Eddie Wakes is a pretty fast recoverer, because that was in June of 49. He was back playing in August, 2 months later. Finished the season with a .306 batting average. The next year, in 1950, the Phillies, the Whiz Kids, as they were known, Eddie Wakes was their leadoff hitter. They won the 1950 pennant. And after the season, he was named the Associated Press Comeback Player of the Year. Now compare that to the movie, where in The Natural, Hobbs doesn't make it back to the major leagues for 16 years. Eddie Wake is back playing in less than 2 months. So that's one. Then in the movie, he also meets Gus Sands, played by Darren McGavin. If you remember in the trailer where Roy Hobbs says, "Don't bet against me," and Gus Sands says, "I already have." He's a bookie whom Hobbs learns enjoys placing large bets against Hobbs. He resembles Arnold Rothstein, the New York bookie gambler behind the fix of the 1919 World Series. Rothstein started gambling and making book when he was about 20. By the late teens, he was famous not only in New York, but throughout the country. So you've got the gambler. Then also in the movie, he is rushed to the hospital. Hobbs is actually as a latent issue with the gun, with the bullet that was still lodged in his body. He misses 3 games. While he's in the hospital, he's visited by the owner of the team, the judge, and he asks Hobbs to throw a game. And he also says that he's got a backup plan, meaning he's got at least one more player in his pocket to throw the game. And the judge says, "As you may know, the prevailing rate for this sort of thing is $10,000. I'm offering you twice that." And before the judge leaves the hospital, he leaves an envelope stuffed with cash on Hobbs's stomach. Now, Hobbs's association with Sands and the request that he throw an important postseason game clearly allude to the 1919 Black Sox scandal, and most specifically to Joe Jackson. Joe Jackson, one of the greatest ball players in the history of the game, was offered $10,000 by his teammate Chick Gandel to join 7 other White Sox in throwing the series. And while we're talking about baseball movies, 8 Men Out tells the story of that 1919 Black Sox scandal. So, next, in The Natural, Hobbs, a left-handed batter, battling injury, comes up to bat in the bottom of the 9th inning of the playoff game. 2 outs, Hobbs represents the winning run. He is facing a relief pitcher with an unhittable pitch. Sound familiar? Well, if you're a baseball fan, you may remember Game 1 of the 1998 World Series. Kirk Gibson, a left-handed batter, battling injury, comes up to bat in the bottom of the 9th. There are 2 outs, and Gibson represents the winning run. Now it's it, and he is facing Hall of Fame relief pitcher, Dennis Eckersley. Yes, almost exactly the same. What's interesting, the natural was in 84. This was in 88. So this is a precursor to Kirk Gibson coming up in the exact same situation as we saw on the film. So let's go and watch this. This is one of my favorite videos in the world.
Bottom of the ninth. A's 4, Dodgers 3. By the way, Gibson is not on deck. 3-1. And he walked him. And look who's coming up. All year long, they looked to him to light the fire. And all year long, he answered the demands until he was physically unable to start tonight with 2 bad legs. The bad left hamstring and the swollen right knee. And with 2 out, you talk about a roll of the dice. This is it. So the Dodgers trying to catch lightning right now. Be an effort to run that far. Gibson was so banged up, he was not introduced. He did not come out onto the field before the game.
Roy, are you all right, fella? Let's play ball.
Fouled away. But the game right now is at the plate. So improbable, the impossible has happened.
How cool. And if you look, if you looked at what was happening in the situation, both of them fouled off a long foul ball for strike 1. Fouled the ball back for strike 2. I mean, it was almost identical. Too cool. Now, to add to the story, recognizing the parallels between the natural and what Kirk Gibson had just done, the bullpen coach for the Dodgers went down to the locker room and put the name Roy Hobbs over Kirk Gibson's locker, covering up his name, because that was exactly Roy Hobbs. So we covered Eddie Waitkus, the Black Sox scandal, and that 88 World Series game. There are a few other true stories in the movie. First, in the movie, and this is earlier, not what you just saw, but earlier in the movie, Hobbs breaks out of a hitting slump and helps the Knights snap a long losing streak with a walk-off home run that shatters the face of the large Bulova clock in the scoreboard. In real life, above the scoreboard in Ebbets Field, as you can see here, the large Bulova watch. And on May 30th, 1946, Bama Rowell of the Boston Braves shattered that clock facing with a monstrous fly ball. The hit sent glass raining down on Brooklyn right fielder Dixie Walker. The ball remained in play because the scoreboard, was part of the wall, if you would. So it bounced back into the outfield. So he ended up with one of the longest doubles in baseball history. Now, the Bulova Company had promised that anyone who hit that stadium timepiece would get a watch. But when Bert Sugar, who you may know as a sports writer for the Times, tracked down Rowell over 40 years later, he told him, "I never got no watch." So Bert Sugar goes to bat for him, calls Bulova to come across with their deal. The Bulova legal department huffily dismissed the claim, ruling that the old promotional offer didn't constitute a valid contract. But after that, some wiser company heads prevailed. And on August of 1987, in a ceremony in his hometown in Citronelle, Alabama, he finally got his watch, 41 years late. As his son said, Daddy was emotional during the ceremony, more emotional than I thought he'd be. It was obvious how much he appreciated that. So that's one. When you watch the movie, look for the Bulova watch to get crashed and think about, I wonder if that guy got his Bulova watch that he was owed. Another one, in the movie, Hobbs names his bat Wonder Boy, branding the name on the barrel. It wasn't unusual for great hitters to name their bats back in those days. In fact, we talked about Shoeless Joe Jackson. He named his bat Black Betsy. Also in the movie, Roy initially sits on the bench for a long time, and he finally gets his chance to play when when the right fielder, Bump Bailey, played by Michael Madsen, goes after a long fly ball, and he dies after running through the outfield fence. Now, no Major League Baseball players actually died from running into a stadium wall, but that incident is probably modeled after many that afflicted Dodger outfielder Pete Reiser. According to one estimate, was carried off the field 11 times after crashing into outfield walls. 9 times he regained consciousness, either in the clubhouse or in the hospital. He almost died after one 47 crash against the concrete wall at Ebbets Field. He was actually administered the last rites. 3 times he sneaked out of the hospital to play. Once he went back into the lineup after the doctors warned him that any blow to the head could kill him. So that was another episode. And then the other, you heard Roy Hobbs say, "I want people when I'm walking down the street to say, there goes the best ever." Well, Hobbs, in some ways, is a tribute to Ted Williams, who famously said, "When I walk down the street and meet people, I just want them to think, there goes the greatest hitter who ever lived." Redford said he patterned his batting stance in the movie after Williams, and he also wore Ted Williams's number 9. So that is the natural. Oh, let's stop my share here and see if we got any questions on the natural. What happened to the woman who shot Waitkus? Well, she went on trial, and I believe that she was sentenced to an institution. So, yes, Ken, that is familiar. That is similar to Joe Hardy. In Damn Yankees, though in the Damn Yankees, it ends with Joe Hardy making a catch in the outfield to save the game, as opposed to this one where it's Roy Hobbs hitting a home run to win the game. Oh my gosh, somebody, Ron, sorry, last time when we were talking about Satchel Paige, I missed your thing about the king in his court. How cool was that? If you're not familiar with the king in his court, Eddie Feiner played softball. He was a softball pitcher, and it was him and 3 other guys. Him, his catcher, a first baseman, and an outfielder. And he would pitch from second base. He would pitch at his knees, all those. And he was just like Satchel Paige, basically, I don't need any other players because I'm going to strike you all out no matter where I'm from. So yes, that was great fun. Were there any legal challenges due? I don't think so. I think all you have to do, Sue, in most of these is saying, you know, any reference to a living person is totally unintended. And I think you get away with those. So any other questions on any of those 3 movies? Because if not, we got a treat. Let's share the scroll first. Well, let me go here. I'm going to go to everyone. Oh, yep. There we go. Because as you may have seen, that's not all the baseball movies. There are tons of them. Here are just some. That's your homework assignment, is to watch every one of these movies by next class. Oh, wait, we don't have another class. So you don't have to do that. But here are just a few. I've kind of arranged them. Up on the top are the closest to factual. And as we work our way down to The Bad News Bear and Sandlot, yeah, not a lot. But here is a great mashup of 29 separate films, some little segments, and it includes all three of the ones that we just showed, plus a whole lot more. So sit back. This thing lasts for about 9 minutes, and you'll love every second of it.
What the hell's going on out here? Nick's scared because his eyelids are jammed in his old man's head. We need a live rooster to take the curse off Jose's glove, and nobody seems to know what to get Millie or Jimmy for their wedding present. Is that about right? That's right. We're dealing with a lot of shit.
You don't know how to play first base. It's not that hard, Scott. Tell him, Wash.
It's incredibly hard.
Top of the 6th, and rookie sensation Ricky Vaughn on the pitch now.
Rosenberger, warm up. You're going in.
Vaughn, a juvenile delinquent in the offseason in his major league debut.
The word on the loose here that the good-looking young pitcher has a major league fastball, but sometimes has problems with his control.
Vaughn into the windup in his first offering. Just a bit outside.
The nice way to say it is he lacks confidence.
You play ball like a girl! Hey, how did you do that?
Charlie, here comes the deuce. And when you speak of me, speak well.
Haywood swings and crushes one towards South America.
You caught?
What's your biggest fear?
Are you crying?
The baseball being hit in my general direction?
That's not crying!
Seriously,
There's no crying in baseball.
No, seriously.
Here's the pitch. Oh, shit.
Hey, good luck with that.
I can't do that.
Who can?
Is losing fun? Is losing fun?
No.
That's what losing sounds like.
Things sure turned out different. For 16 years, I've lived with the idea that I could have been the best in the game. And then when I walked down the street, people would have looked and they would have said, "There goes Roy Hobbs. The best there ever was in this game."
I'm not in it for a record, I'll tell you that. I'm not in it for a ring. Most of us bang around the game for a while and then we're forgotten. This is your one shot to go out there and show them what you're made of.
I still get such a bang out of it. Playing ball. Same as I did when I first come up. You get out there and the stands are full and everybody's cheering. It's like everybody in the world come to see you. Getting thrown out of baseball, if you will, was like having part of me amputated. He will come. I'd wake up at night with the smell of the ballpark in my nose, the cool of the grass on my feet, the thrill of the grass. Coach, you want to throw?
I just remember that until you reach the top, there's always guys above you hustling to keep you down here and guys below you pushing to take your job.
How about you and I be honest about what each of us want out of this? I want to milk the last ounce of baseball you got in you.
The organization wants to make a change.
It just got too hard.
The A's have blown an 11-0 lead.
It's supposed to be hard. If it wasn't hard, everyone would do it. The hard is what makes it great.
The Tigers with a 1-0 lead, but the story would be the inability of the Yankees to do anything with Chappell. No runs, no hits, no errors, but more importantly, no base runners of any kind. Billy Chappell is looking a possible perfect game right in the eye.
We're in the ninth. 2 down. Once again, the Indians 1 out away from the American League Championship.
Sometimes, when you feel right, there's a groove there. The bat just eases into it and meets that ball. When the bat meets that ball, you can just feel that ball just give. You know it's going to go a long way. Damn, if you don't feel like you're going to live forever.
I have been walking on ball fields for 16 years. People all say that I've had a bad break.
Today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth.
Greatest season of my life. Wouldn't want to do it again.
Are we allowed to cry?
You can cry if you wish to.
Yeah.
Now, I put in the chat, that is the list of all of the movies that are shown there. So, so if you were thinking, I have no idea what that movie was, if there's ones that show up there that you're not familiar with, now you can go get them. I believe you're right. I've watched every one of those. So that was my homework. That was my homework assignment. The first couple months of COVID was to watch all of those movies since I couldn't leave the house. So, so any other questions on anything? Huh?
My only comment was, it was great, Tom. Thank you so much. On behalf of the Minnesota Ollie, the Minneapolis Ollie, thank you, thank you.
Oh, it was a pleasure, and you know that. So, so you've got a survey to take. You got homework before you can go out for recess. And Marjorie, do you have a question?
It's not a question, it's a story.
Oh,
that I
great.
hope will be amusing to anybody besides me. When I was dating my husband, the second date we ever went on, he told me to pick a movie to go see. And thinking it would be a nice, safe baseball movie, I picked Bill Durham.
Oh, okay.
Do I need to say anything else?
Bill Durham has some interesting aspects for a second date. Yes, and it was on that list, I'm sure. Well, of course, when they come out and say, you know, we got a lot of shit going on out here. So,
Good, Tom.
Is that that is your husband that you got married?
Yes, like we're
You
going
survived?
on like 32 years right now.
You survived Bull Durham as your second
Oh,
date?
did he? Yeah, it turned out not to be a terrible choice after all.
Howard.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for this. This was wonderful. Absolutely. And a wonderfully, wonderfully, disgustingly hot day. And I'd like to add that thanks to Tom, I've become very avid fan of the Aurora women's soccer league team here. And they are now playing in the championship. Yes. They are the only undefeated team in the league and one of the few success stories in Minnesota sports.
Yep.
That's why I could put together a 7-session class on heartbreak in Minnesota sports, because we have plenty of it to fill 10 hours worth of time. So,
Tom, what do you think of Field of Dreams?
Well, first, I'm a farm boy from Iowa. So, of course, You know, I think it's great. I actually read Ray Kinsella's, you know, Shoeless Joe Jackson Comes to Iowa, the book that it was based on, before it was ever a movie. And if you want to read some great baseball books, Ray Kinsella is great. He's got 2 or 3 of them that are just excellent. One of them is there. Second, the most amazing thing about the Field of Dreams is the field itself still exists. When you think of, this is a movie location that was shot, 30 some years ago, and it stayed. You know, what other movie location, you know, do people keep it in that situation? And in fact, if you know the story of the Field of Dreams, you know, the next year, there was 2 farmers, and the guy on the left field wanted to plow it up and put in corn because I'm here to make money. And he got so much grief about it that they made him keep it as a non-usable piece of farmland in some of the best farmland in the state. I always cry when I want to play catch with my dad, or, you know, I've got a grandson now who's 10, and you know, every time we play catch, that first ball, I think it's so cool in Field of Dreams, when they play catch the first time, and Kevin Costner holds on to it for a couple of seconds. It's just like, this is so cool. There's a great documentary about making that, and one of the coolest stories was that last scene, you know, when they went up and did that. The guy who was dad, you know, had an old catcher's glove, you know, one of the flat ones, not easy. And they could only do one shot because they had to have the sun at the certain time. And he said, we know we're going to be playing catch back and forth for about 5 minutes, and I cannot drop the ball. He goes, I never had so much pressure in my life, because because if they didn't get the shot then, they had to set it all up the next night because you had to wait for that weather. And he said, I got this old piece of baseball glove that isn't that good, and I have to make perfect throws and perfect catches for all of that time. So a great story. Why did you ask what I thought of the Field of Dreams? Did you have an answer you were hoping for?
No, I just thought it was a great movie.
It is a great movie. Yeah, you know, it's one of those where you go and say, I'm not going to cry, and you still do every time when you go, Dad. You know, one other little piece of trivia. When that movie was originally filmed and shown to the original audiences, the test audiences, he did not say Dad. And the way it was originally filmed was, you want to have a catch. And the reception they got from the audience was, you've got to somehow let both of them know that it's father and son. And so if you watch the movie, the word dad comes out when nobody's on screen. It was just added later because in the original one, it was just, you know, he knew that was his dad, but they said, you've got to acknowledge that, you know, to your dad, that that's who you are. So there's some great stories, some great films there. Well, it is, I am overtime, and you know, I could talk baseball all afternoon. So
thank you everyone for joining us. And Tom, wow. I mean, I'm laughing, I'm crying. You got it all today.
Oh.
Excellent, Tom.
Well, and as my last slide, which I won't put up just because it'll take a while, but thanks for coming out to the ballpark. And as my mother would say, safe home.
Safe home.
Thank you.
Safe home. Thank you, everyone. Take our survey. And thank you to the University of Minnesota, Ollie, for putting this on. Thank you, everyone.
Wasn't that fun?
Oh my gosh. So much.
Like I said, I'm not going anywhere. If anybody wants to stay on and shoot threes, I can shoot forever. So yeah.
Wow. I saw a lot of happy smiling faces here.
Well, it was,
Tom,
yes.
what's your favorite movie, baseball movie?
Oh, that is,
you have one?
That is so tough. I'm gonna have to go back to this list and see.
Just curious, there's a ton of great ones.
Those are some, you know what's so funny now is as you watch some of these, like when you saw the Natural tie-in with Kirk Gibson, it's like, I can't watch that movie without picturing the other, there's so many tie-ins, and I've been to the Field of Dreams and all. So, it's, there's a lot of them that I could sit here and watch all day. So,
Tom, Moneyball. What was the year of the A's team that Moneyball was based on? Actually, that's my favorite. Is Moneyball.
And what's interesting, I'll answer that in just one answer. But it's so interesting because it's a Michael Lewis book, and much like The Big Short. Remember the movie? Another Michael. Yep. I read Moneyball when it first came out as a book, right? And could not figure when it said we're going to put a movie together of this. It was like, how do you pull that together when you look at what was in there? It was the 2002 season, and the book actually came out the next year. And then Columbia bought the rights in 2004, but it didn't get made till another 7 years. So all these creative differences between the studio and the author. But yeah, if you read 2000, Moneyball initially, it was all about analytics and things. It's like, how do you put that on a movie screen to make sense to folks? But and if you read the book, there's so much information in there that doesn't even get touched on in the movie, because they focus so much on the A's winning 20 games and all, but just the whole, how do you value the skills of a baseball player? I mean, yes, Joan.
How do you look at that Twins pitcher up? I think it's Schmelzer with the glasses and not say wild thing.
Yeah, I know, isn't it? And the beard and all. Yes, yeah, it's so funny. You get some of these characters that just a little outside.
Thank you so much for so many insights, so many. I wish I lived closer. I would be auditing your classes.
Oh, you're always invited. Yeah, and the thing about baseball, when you're saying you take Devin Smeltzer and look like Wild Thing, the thing about baseball is it's slow enough moving, and everybody's faces, it's not like football where they're covered, and it's not like basketball where everybody's racing all the time. Here you get so many close-up pictures that it's like, yeah, that reminds me of, you could do, and there's so many players you just remember what they look like and all. So yeah, it's great fun. Anything else? Well, I've had a ball. I hope you understand that. Thea, thanks for making this happen. And I was going to say, and this is a shout out to the Ollie, Minnesota group, is there is no way I am the best instructor in the Ollie program. My gosh. I've been, long before I was an instructor, I was a student, and I still am. And I was thinking the ability that allowed me to be here today was probably mostly availability.
I tell you what, I put out.
I'm nowhere near the best instructor in Ollie, Minneapolis, but I was available today, so that makes.
I'm so glad you were.
I've never disagreed with you.
Yes.
I do now. In fact, I took this survey while we were talking.
Yes.
And you're going to blush, so I won't tell you what I said, but it was all good. A lot of people know things and know how to present them. Some people make them come alive and make you want to go, I can't believe this is over. I blink. And you do that.
Well, I'm a ball doing it, so I better go because I'm blushing. And my mother would say, Tommy, you got chores to do. So I don't really have chores to do, but my mother would tell me I did. So.
And by the way, King in His Court, I was a little kid in Chicago. I grew up, in fact, June 16th, 1949 is my birthday, 2 days after that guy was shot. But,
really?
Oh yeah. And I'm from Chicago. And we used to go to a field called Thillins. And it was a small sort of a semi-pro field in Chicago next to a Dairy Queen. And we used to go there and sit and watch the King in His Court. When we couldn't afford to go in, we'd find ways to sit on the outside and watch. I don't think people realize how talented they were.
Oh my gosh.
It was breathtaking.
They were great. And he, Eddie Feiner with his nice little, flat top haircut. And I mean, he just looked as you walked up to the plate like, yeah, you try to hit me, and they were saying, the thing is, when you only have 4 players and you're on offense, oh my gosh, you get 4 home run hitters and there's not a weak spot in your lineup when there's only 4 guys. And I mean, they won more games. They probably had a higher winning percentage than the Globetrotters did. I mean, they were impossible to beat. So, but yeah. And they would do the same thing, make their little tour around the Midwest, and people come out, pay to watch softball. So,
I have a friend who's who was a good ball player, and he's kind of our age, and we talk about baseball, and some of the younger people around us, their eyes kind of glaze over, and it's like, baseball, it's boring. They say, no, baseball is the best. And this class today reminded me just how much I love baseball. It's great.
The one thing, this is my last little thing on baseball. The one thing about baseball is every situation you can describe in a handful of words that everyone understands what's going on. Okay. Like, I don't know how many people caught why Tom Hanks was yelling at her outfielder, but he said, we're up by 2 and you throw home. Now, if you understand baseball, you can see, okay, you had runners on first, you had a runner on third or second, runner on second or whatever, and you hit a ball and that runner on second is going to score, but you're still ahead by a run. The run you really care about is the person who is just batting.
And you don't want them to wind up in scoring position. Because
that's right. When you threw home, that allowed them to get to second, and you're going, my third graders know that you just don't care about that first run. It's that second one. And it's like, who are you playing for? Everyone knows that. But as a situation, you can take that situation and describe it in a few words. It goes, yep, know exactly what they should have done, which is so hard to do in other sports because there's so many moving parts. It's hard to describe a situation. But baseball's an easy one to paint a picture on because they're all it's chess pieces, but individual at a time, and everyone in their place. So, well, Thea, you probably got other things to do today, don't you? So,
Thank
I'm
you,
gone.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for a great event.